It was supposed to be just a quiet errand after work. Emma Hayes, a 27-year-old trauma nurse, had just ended her grueling 12-hour shift at St. Jude Medical Center. The sky was dimming into shades of gray as she walked through the light drizzle that coated the sidewalks of downtown D.C., heading toward a small pawn shop tucked between a laundromat and an abandoned bookstore. In her pocket was a crumpled receipt, the last trace of her late father's wristwatch, a worn silver timepiece she was determined to reclaim. Emma's scrubs clung to her from the damp air, her hair pulled back in a fraying ponytail, and her sneakers squeaked softly with every wet step. Her body was exhausted, but her mind focused only on the watch, one of the few physical memories of her father, a firefighter who had passed away 2 years earlier. The pawn shop was quiet when she entered, the familiar scent of old wood and rusted metal welcoming her like a museum of forgotten stories. 2 customers lingered by the shelves, speaking in hushed tones, while the elderly clerk nodded at her and disappeared into the back. Moments later, Emma clutched the wristwatch in her hand, worn, scratched, but still ticking. She smiled faintly, the kind of smile that only grief understands, and turned toward the door. That's when she heard the crash. A body hit the floor hard. A man, a tall, muscular figure in a camouflage jacket, lay motionless on his back near the register. His eyes were wide open, staring at nothing. No breath, no movement. The clerk panicked and began yelling, "Don't touch him! Call 911! Don't get involved!" But Emma didn't hesitate. She dropped to her knees, pressed 2 fingers to the man's neck. No pulse. No airflow. Her mind emptied of fear and filled with training. With instinct. She began chest compressions, 30 counts, then rescue breaths. Again and again. The clerk shouted something about lawsuits. One customer was frozen, the other fumbled with a phone. But Emma stayed locked in the rhythm, the resistance under her palms, the hope that maybe she wasn't too late. Rain pattered softly outside. Inside, a battle was happening between life and loss. And Emma Hayes was the only one willing to fight it. The ambulance lights flashed red and blue across the shop's window as paramedics rushed in. One of them knelt beside Emma, checking vitals, then glanced at her with a startled look. "Are you a nurse?" he asked, breathless. Emma nodded, sweat dripping from her forehead. "You saved him," he said, then turned away, helping to load the man onto the stretcher. Only after the stretcher rolled out did the stillness return. The clerk said nothing now, eyes wide, lips tight. The other customers backed away, whispering as they left. Emma stood up slowly, her knees sore, her chest heavy from adrenaline. In her hand, she still held her father's watch, clenched like a talisman. She didn't say a word, just walked out into the night, unaware that one of the bystanders had recorded the entire scene on their phone. She didn't go home expecting anything. No thanks, no reward. She was just grateful he had survived. But the next morning, everything began to unravel. Emma arrived at the hospital early. Her scrubs were fresh, her badge clipped neatly to her top. She nodded to coworkers in the hallway, but something felt off. Glances were colder. Conversations stopped when she walked by. Before she could ask, her name echoed over the intercom. "Emma Hayes, please report to Human Resources." A tight knot formed in her chest. She entered the HR office and found 2 administrators and the director of nursing waiting in stiff silence. A printed still frame from the pawn shop video sat on the desk. Emma recognized her own face mid-compression, her badge clearly visible. "We understand you acted with good intentions," one of them began. "But you were wearing hospital attire. Your badge was exposed. It gave the public the impression you were acting in an official capacity. That exposes this institution to liability." Emma blinked. "He was dying. I wasn't on duty. I was just—" "That's exactly the issue," the director interrupted. "You acted without clearance, without coverage, in a non-sterile environment. You weren't authorized to render care. If something had gone wrong—" "But it didn't," Emma said, her voice rising slightly. "He's alive." "We're aware," HR replied. But protocols exist for a reason. And just like that, she was terminated. No hearing, no compassion, just a printed form, a cold signature, and a request to hand over her badge. Emma walked out of the same hallways where she had once saved lives, now stripped of title, income, and identity. She had followed her oath. She had done what any decent human being would do, and it had cost her everything. At home, she sat in silence, the hospital badge now gone, replaced only by the soft ticking of her father's watch. A new sound echoed soon after the buzz of her phone. The video had gone viral. At first, Emma didn't even look at the video. Her phone buzzed endlessly, calls, texts, notifications stacking up like a storm she had no energy to face. She sat alone in her apartment, still in her scrubs, staring at the darkened television screen, while her father's watch ticked quietly on the table. The pain of being discarded, the humiliation of being made an example, gnawed at her like something alive. She wasn't angry, just empty. But the world outside her door wasn't silent. The video, shaky and grainy, showed her kneeling beside a stranger, performing CPR with unshakable focus. No news anchor could script the raw intensity in her eyes. She looked like someone at war with death and winning. Social media erupted. Number hero nurse. Number Emma Hayes. Number fired for saving a life. News stations picked it up within hours. DC nurse saves Navy veteran, gets fired. Commentators debated liability versus ethics. Healthcare professionals weighed in on outdated hospital policies. But for millions of ordinary people watching from home, it was simpler. Emma Hayes had done the right thing, and she'd paid the price for it. That evening, as she sat curled on her couch, the rain returned, tapping softly at the windows like it had the night before. Her phone buzzed once more. Unknown caller. She hesitated, then answered. "Miss Hayes?" a voice said. Calm, commanding, male. "This is Admiral Richard Ross, United States Navy. I apologize for the unannounced nature of this call, but I believe you deserve to know the man you saved yesterday." Emma blinked. I don't understand." The Admiral continued. "His name is Commander Logan West. He's one of our most decorated Navy SEALs. He suffered a cardiac episode during an unscheduled civilian errand. No one recognized him. But you acted. Without hesitation." Emma's voice trembled. "I didn't know who he was." "You didn't need to," Ross said. "You followed your oath. You honored your training. You saved a national asset." She could barely breathe. The Admiral paused before continuing. "We'd like you to come with us tomorrow. You're being recognized at the highest level." "Recognized?" she repeated. Ross's voice softened. "The president would like to meet you." Emma froze, clutching the phone like it was the only real thing in the room. The next morning, a sleek black car arrived at her apartment. 2 uniformed officers escorted her to a private military jet. Emma sat quietly, her hands clasped, her mind still trying to catch up. She wore a navy blue dress and a borrowed coat from a neighbor who had rushed to help when she heard the news. By midday, Emma was standing inside the White House. Marble floors stretched beneath her. Portraits of past leaders lined the halls. Everything felt surreal. She wasn't a dignitary. She wasn't even employed. She was just a nurse who refused to look away when someone collapsed. And then she saw him. The President of the United States stood near the window, not with fanfare, but with warmth. He turned, extended a hand, and said, "Emma Hayes, I've been waiting to meet you." Her breath caught in her throat. He spoke to her not like a politician, but like someone who understood. He told the story of what happened in the pawn shop, of how her quiet courage reminded a divided nation of something simple: decency. The speech wasn't televised. There were no flashing cameras. It was intimate, personal. And then he did something she never imagined. He presented her with the Presidential Medal of Freedom, the highest civilian honor in the country. The applause that followed echoed through the historic room, but Emma barely heard it. Her hands trembled as the ribbon settled across her chest. Tears welled in her eyes, not from pride, but from disbelief. She had come to Washington with nothing. She now stood among the highest levels of recognition. But the president wasn't finished. He handed her a sealed folder. "Effective immediately," he said. "A new federal medical position has been created in your name. You'll work with military hospitals and emergency training centers nationwide." Emma gasped softly. "You'll also be provided with transportation and—" He gestured to an aide holding a crisp deed. "A home, in Georgetown. It's yours." The room blurred. Her knees weakened. This wasn't just thanks. It was redemption, purpose, a future that no HR department could erase. And still, the part that moved her most was what came next. That evening, Emma was taken to Walter Reed Military Medical Center. She entered a quiet room where Commander Logan West, pale but recovering, lay resting. When he saw her, his face lit up. "You're her," he whispered. Emma nodded. "You're the nurse." They spoke for hours. He told her what little he remembered, her voice counting compressions, the strength in her hands, the feeling that someone refused to let him go. Emma listened, her eyes wet. "You were a person," she said, "and I couldn't walk away." Before she left, Logan reached into the drawer beside his bed and handed her a small object, a Navy Challenge coin, engraved and worn. "I don't give these to just anyone," he said. Emma took it gently. She had been fired for saving his life, but in this room, under soft lights and the steady beep of monitors, she had never felt more validated, more seen. The days that followed moved like a dream, except Emma Hayes wasn't asleep anymore. The story of the fired nurse who saved a Navy SEAL dominated headlines across the country. Editorials called her a hero. Late-night hosts talked about her case. Protesters stood outside the hospital that had let her go, holding signs that read, "Policy is not equal to humanity," and "Emma Hayes saved a life, you took her job." But Emma wasn't watching the television. She was on base at a trauma training facility in Maryland, standing before a room full of young medics. The same hands that had once compressed the chest of a dying man now demonstrated emergency procedures to soldiers heading to war zones. She was no longer just teaching medicine. She was teaching moments, real ones. "You won't always have backup," she told them. "You won't always have clearance or perfect conditions. But you will have a choice, and someone's life may depend on whether or not you make it." Her voice was steady, her gaze clear. The Medal of Freedom never left her wall at home, but it never came with her. Emma carried the weight of that moment, not in medals, but in the quiet determination of her work. Commander Logan West's recovery was slow, but he never missed an opportunity to thank her publicly or privately. When he was well enough to speak at a small Navy ceremony, he asked her to stand beside him. "She fought for me when I couldn't," he told the crowd. "She didn't see rank or name. She saw a heartbeat, and she gave it back to me." Emma stood silently beside him, eyes lowered, hands folded over the challenge coin he'd given her. She didn't need applause. She had something more valuable, his survival, and the knowledge that she'd done the right thing, even when it cost her everything. And yet, not all wounds had healed. Every now and then, she'd walk past her old hospital's St. Jude Medical Center on the way to a veterans outreach clinic nearby. No one from her former workplace ever reached out. No apology, no letter, just silence. She'd look up at the windows she used to peer through on night shifts and wonder how many lives were being saved behind them, and how many more were being forgotten. But she no longer mourned her job. The pain had reshaped itself into something stronger. Not bitterness, purpose. Her new home in Georgetown, modest and sun-filled, became her sanctuary. She'd sit on the porch with a cup of coffee, watching the flag outside dance gently in the breeze. The neighbors waved. Some saluted. A few left small gifts or heartfelt letters on her doorstep. One child, no older than 10, left a drawing. A nurse in scrubs kneeling beside a man with the words, "You made the world better." Emma kept it on her refrigerator, but the most powerful change happened inside her. She no longer questioned her instincts. She no longer feared the consequences of doing the right thing, because now, she had seen what happened when one choice, one refusal to step back, could change not just a life, but a nation's conscience. One quiet afternoon, as golden light filtered through the windows of her Georgetown home, Emma Hayes stood before a small display in her living room. On the wall hung a shadow box. Inside, her father's wristwatch, the Navy challenge coin from Commander West, and the folded letter from the president. But it wasn't the symbols that made her pause. It was the memory. The sound of rain on the pawnshop roof, the stillness of a stranger's body, the instinct to kneel when others shouted don't, and the heartbeat that came back not just his but hers.